So, my name is Emily, I am 22 years old, and this entire mess started after my dad passed away. Growing up, it was just me, my mom Linda, and my dad John. We were not the picture-perfect Hallmark family, but we were solid, happy, and close. My dad was not just my father, he was my best friend. He was the kind of dad who would sneak me milkshakes when my mom said I already had too much sugar, who taught me how to change a tire at 15 because he said every girl should know how to handle herself on the road, and who laughed at my sarcastic jokes instead of scolding me. When I was 18, he died suddenly of a heart attack. No warning, no time to prepare, just gone. One day he was sitting across the dinner table joking about how terrible the mashed potatoes were, and the next I was standing at his funeral. My whole world cracked that day, and although I tried to stay strong for my mom, I never stopped missing him. 2 years later, my mom met someone new. His name was Rick, 46 years old. And from the very first time I met him, I felt my stomach twist. He was not abusive or violent, nothing extreme like that, but he carried himself with this I am the alpha male energy that just did not match reality. He acted like some big provider and leader, but really he was a midlife crisis wrapped in cargo shorts, always talking big while cracking open another cheap beer. Rick came with 2 kids of his own, Cody, who was 7, and Mia, who was 4. The kids themselves were innocent and honestly pretty sweet. They were not the problem. The problem was Rick. From the start, he treated me like I was his built-in free babysitter. He had this phrase he liked to throw around, family helps family, which was really his code for, Emily takes care of my responsibilities while I drink beer and play poker. At the time I was 19, a full-time college student trying to balance classes and a part-time job at Target. My job was not glamorous, but it paid for my car, my insurance, and my books. I was not living in luxury. Meanwhile, Rick had a decent job at an auto shop, but most of his paycheck went straight to Bud Light, poker nights, and whatever midlife crisis hobby he was chasing that month. My mom was working full-time as a nurse, often pulling double shifts, which meant she did not always see the way things were happening behind the scenes. First, I tried to be nice. I really did. If mom was working late, I would help watch Cody and Mia. I told myself it was temporary, that I was just being a good daughter and helping out until things evened out. But it never evened out. It snowballed into Rick treating me like his personal live-in nanny. He would call me while I was at work and say things like, "Hey, pick up Mia from daycare." And when I told him I was literally working until 9, he would just say, "Figure it out. You are family now." Spoiler. I did not figure it out. I started ignoring his calls and preparing myself for the passive-aggressive remarks he would throw my way later. By the time I turned 20, I managed to scrape together enough money to move out. I got a tiny apartment with my best friend Sarah, and I thought, finally, freedom. No more unpaid babysitting, no more Rick. I was wrong. Rick started using my apartment like it was some kind of Airbnb for his kids. He would drop them off without warning, sometimes leaving them with nothing but a half-empty bag of goldfish crackers and a casual, "Be back later." One time he Venmo'd me $15 with the note for pizza. When he dropped them off for the entire Saturday, 2 growing kids for the whole day with $15. By the time they left, I was $40 out of pocket and emotionally destroyed after 3 hours of Paw Patrol that made me question the very meaning of life. The breaking point came one Sunday morning. I had just pulled a brutal week of double shifts, so I was finally sleeping in. Around 8 in the morning, I woke up to pounding on my apartment door. When I opened it, there were Cody and Mia standing there with backpacks, looking like contestants on a survival reality show. Behind them, I saw Rick's minivan already rolling down the street. He did not even stop to talk. He yelled out the window, "Feed them, bathe them, school Monday," and then just drove off. On my lawn. On a Sunday morning. I stood there completely stunned, my jaw literally hanging open, while the kids looked up at me like, "Well, guess we live here now." I pulled them inside, made them waffles, and tried not to scream into the void. Then I picked up my phone and called my mom. I unloaded everything. I told her about how Rick had been using me for years, about how he had literally abandoned his kids on my doorstep like I was some emergency foster care, and how I could not keep doing this. First she was quiet. Then she said, "Rick told me you loved helping out." I almost dropped my phone. Loved helping out? Helping out is watching them for 2 hours so he can run an errand, not being their full-time surprise parent. Once my mom realized the truth, she was furious. Rick found out I had told her, and that is when my phone absolutely blew up. I had 60 missed calls and 20 voicemails in the span of 2 hours. He ranted about how I was selfish, how I was ruining his marriage, and my personal favorite, that I should be grateful for gaining siblings. Because yes, Rick, nothing says gratitude like being forced into surprise parenthood for kids I never signed up for. The best part, though, is what happened next. My mom finally saw him for who he really was. She confronted him directly and told him that if he wanted to keep living like some bachelor frat boy, then he could do it alone. She changed the locks on the house, packed his belongings, and kicked him out. Rick is now couch surfing with one of his bar buddies. Cody and Mia live with my mom full-time where they are actually cared for, and I finally have peace and quiet for the first time in years. Honestly, the sweetest revenge wasn't some big plan. It was letting Rick's own laziness burn his perfect family man act to the ground. So apparently Rick decided that being kicked out did not mean stay gone. In Rick's brain it meant take a little break, crash on somebody's couch, then swing back around in 3 weeks and grab everything that isn't nailed down. It all started one Saturday morning when my phone rang, and it was my mom in full panic mode. Her voice was shaky as she said Rick was standing on the porch demanding his stuff. Naturally, I threw on the first pair of shoes I could find and raced over. I was halfway expecting him to be collecting his clothes, maybe his tools, or at least something that actually belonged to him. But no, Rick's definition of his stuff was something entirely different. When I pulled up to the house, what I saw was pure chaos. Rick was standing there with the laundry basket like he was competing in the worst episode of Supermarket Sweep ever filmed. He was frantically loading it with the most random household items he could grab. The first thing he took was the toaster, as if it was a priceless family heirloom. Then he stacked in a bunch of Mom's Old Better Homes and Gardens magazines. Then, with all the seriousness of a man reclaiming sacred treasure, he grabbed a half-empty bottle of Dawn dish soap. I swear it was like watching a raccoon raid a kitchen. The cherry on top, though, was what he was actually demanding. He wanted Mom's flat-screen TV, the Keurig she had splurged on during Black Friday, the blender I had bought her for Christmas, and this one made my blood boil. My dad's vintage Craftsman tool set from the garage. Tools that had been in our family for decades, engraved with my dad's initials J.R. for John Roberts. Tools my dad taught me to use when I was 15, standing in the driveway, showing me how to fix things instead of paying someone else. That tool set was not just metal and wood. It was memories, it was part of my dad. And here was Rick trying to shove it into a laundry basket like it was some garage sale find. By the time I got out of the car and walked up, he had moved on to yanking cords out of the wall. He was trying to unplug the Wi-Fi router like it was rightfully his. When I asked what in the world he was doing, he barked that he was taking what's mine, all while juggling a toaster and a pile of magazines. At that point I had zero patience left. I pulled out my phone and held it up, reminding him that the police could decide if his child support payments somehow included the rights to Mom's appliances and internet connection. The moment the word police was even implied, he froze. His face twitched, his jaw clenched, and he muttered something about me being dramatic before dropping the router like it was radioactive. The level of audacity, though, only grew. He had the nerve to look me in the eye and say that I owed him respect after all the babysitting he did for me. Babysitting for me. I almost lost it right there in the driveway. This man had never once taken care of me, not for a single hour. He was not there for me when I was sick, not there for me when I was juggling school and work, not there for me when I was crying after my dad's funeral. The only thing he had ever babysat was a six-pack and maybe his own ego. The idea that he had done me some kind of favor was so delusional it was almost funny. Eventually, after failing to load up on appliances and sentimental items, Rick stormed off with his pathetic laundry basket of random junk, muttering under his breath that Mom would regret this. He stomped across the lawn like a sulking child who had just been denied candy at Walmart. Watching his dramatic exit would have been comical if I wasn't so furious about what he had tried to take. That night, though, he reached a whole new level of ridiculous. He sent my mom a long rambling text message that honestly deserves to be framed in the Museum of Gaslighting. In it, he claimed she owed him for all the babysitting he had done when I supposedly dumped my kids on him. Yes, you read that right. According to Rick, Cody and Mia were apparently my kids, and he was the long-suffering hero who had been forced to raise them while I went off to live my selfish life. The sheer audacity of rewriting history like that almost left me speechless. Almost. I told my mom that the irony of that text could power a small city. The fact that this man, who had repeatedly abandoned his own children on my doorstep without food or supervision, was now trying to claim he was my savior was laughable in a tragic sort of way. My mom agreed, shaking her head at the insanity of it all, and then she printed the text out, just in case Rick tried pulling any legal nonsense later. So, a few weeks after the whole Rick raiding the house like a raccoon incident, My mom got a call from Cody's teacher, Mrs. Franklin. Now, normally when a teacher calls, it is the usual routine of a quick update on grades, behavior, or some missing homework. But this call started differently. Mrs. Franklin opened with a compliment saying, "Can I just say, whoever was helping Cody with his schoolwork before did an amazing job. He was one of the most prepared second graders I've had." My mom was taken aback, a little confused, and asked who she thought had been helping him. When Mrs. Franklin clarified, my mom explained that it had been me. Back when I was still getting dumped with the role of unpaid tutor and babysitter, I had been drilling Cody on spelling lists, making flashcards, and even inventing goofy memory games just to keep him engaged. I still remember sitting at the kitchen table with him, turning multiplication tables into little competitions where he could earn gummy bears if he got a streak of correct answers. It was exhausting at times, but it worked. Cody had been thriving. Then Mrs. Franklin's tone shifted. She explained that recently she had noticed a decline. Cody was struggling more with reading comprehension, losing confidence during math drills, and falling behind on classwork that he had once been ahead in. She asked carefully if there had been a change at home, because sometimes kids act out or backslide when there is stress in the family. My mom, who is usually polite and reserved to a fault, let out a tired sigh and told her, "Well, his father is not exactly reliable." That was her nurse code way of saying, his dad is a man-child who thinks homework help means tossing an iPad in his direction. When mom told me about the call later, I felt this sharp pang of guilt. It hit me that Cody had been doing so well in school when I was stepping in, and now that I was out of the picture he was slipping. It almost felt like I had abandoned him. But then I reminded myself that I was not his parent. I had never signed up to be his parent. I was the older stepsister who got shoved into the role of free nanny and unpaid tutor, because Rick could not be bothered to handle his own responsibilities. Still, it hurt. It hurt to know that Cody, who is such a sweet kid, was falling behind just because his father could not be bothered to sit with him for 20 minutes over a math worksheet. As if the universe wanted to twist the knife further, that same night Rick texted me completely out of the blue. His message said, "Stop messing with my son's head. You're making him dependent on you and it's ruining his education." I actually had to read it twice. This man was seriously accusing me of ruining Cody's education by helping him succeed? That is like blaming firefighters for wet houses. The sheer delusion of it almost made me laugh, but underneath the humor was anger. Rick had abandoned his own kids on my doorstep countless times, but now I was the problem for actually giving them some structure? When I showed the message to mom, we both laughed about how ridiculous it was, but we also realized something needed to change. Cody's teacher was right. He needed stability. He needed someone who cared enough to push him. So my mom and I sat down and worked out a schedule. 3 nights a week, either she or I would sit with Cody after school and go through his homework. On nights when mom was too drained from nursing shifts, I would swing by, pick him up, and we would tackle it together at my apartment. We kept it lighthearted, turning vocabulary practice into goofy stories, and math drills into little competitions. Cody responded immediately. He told me one evening in his completely earnest little kid voice, "Emily, you make homework fun. Dad just yells at me." That hit me right in the chest. Not because I felt proud, but because it broke my heart. No kid should ever feel like learning is punishment. No kid should be scared of getting yelled at for struggling with math facts. Cody deserved better than a father who treated multiplication tables like a personal inconvenience. And slowly the work paid off. Within a month, his teacher was already noticing improvement. His test scores began creeping back up, his confidence was returning, and for the first time in weeks he actually seemed excited to show me what he was learning. He would proudly announce new words he had mastered or quiz me back on spelling lists like it was a game. Watching him regain that spark made me realize just how much of a difference it made to simply have someone in his corner. Meanwhile, Rick was still off somewhere, nursing his bruised ego and spinning conspiracy theories about how I was turning the kids against him. As if Cody and Mia needed me to plant seeds of resentment. The reality was much simpler. Kids notice who shows up and who doesn't. You can't expect loyalty when the only thing you give them is neglect. Rick could scream, text, and blame me all he wanted, but the truth was staring him in the face. Hate to break it to you, champ, but you can't lose what you never bothered to win. So after Rick's spectacularly failed attempt to reclaim anything resembling authority at our house, he apparently decided it was time to reboot his cool single dad image. He started dating a new woman, let's call her Melissa. A single mom with 3 kids of her own. On paper it sounded like a cute idea. A blended family adventure, kids bonding, all the Instagrammable fun. In practice, it was a disaster in slow motion. Melissa somehow found my Instagram. I don't even know how, but Cody, being Cody, had apparently been talking about me nonstop to anyone who would listen, and she slid into my DMs asking in all seriousness whether Rick was actually good with kids. I stared at that message for a solid 2 minutes. Normally, I would have ignored it, but the thought of those poor kids getting sucked into Rick's chaos compelled me. Someone had to step in. So, I drafted a response. Not just a sentence or two, but a full-on detailed essay. I was polite, precise, and meticulously thorough. I included bullet points, anecdotes, and timestamps of all the memorable disasters Rick had orchestrated. There was the infamous Target abandonment incident where he left Cody and Mia to wander the aisles while he went for a quick drink, and the photo evidence of Cody holding a spaghetti bowl like he was negotiating hostages. I even added a pro tip, warning Melissa that when Rick claimed he was teaching life lessons, he actually meant instructing the kids on sneaking snacks without their mother noticing. I attached a few screenshots of his ridiculous texts, the ones where he tried to spin neglect into some kind of heroic parenting narrative. Melissa's response was pure gold. She laughed so hard in her text that I could practically hear her cackling through the screen. She thanked me profusely for saving her months of headaches and added a side note about Rick owning 17 novelty socks but somehow never having clean laundry. I nearly fell out of my chair. It felt like I had been given a backstage pass to the ongoing collapse of his reputation. Meanwhile, Rick was blissfully living in his own fantasy world. He texted Cody one afternoon, gloating about how he and Melissa were about to be the ultimate cool dads, and that they were going to do all the fun stuff. Cody looked at him like Rick had just suggested wearing socks on his hands as fashion. Later, Cody leaned over and whispered to me that his dad had just called pancakes boring. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing in front of him. Rick's misguided attempts escalated to public disasters. He organized a park playdate, determined to prove he could be the fun dad. He showed up with cupcakes, a frisbee, and a vague sense of optimism, but he forgot the essentials: plates, napkins, and most critically, the kids' water bottles. Within minutes, sugar-fueled chaos erupted. Cody, Mia, and one of Melissa's kids staged a sticky cupcake rebellion, flinging frosting, knocking over the frisbee, and sprinting in circles while Rick panicked, waving the frisbee like it was a shield against the miniature tornado of chaos he had unleashed. By the end, he looked completely defeated, as if a toddler tornado had personally targeted him. The aftermath was even more amusing. Melissa messaged me again, this time laughing hysterically. She confirmed that Rick was clearly not ready for 3 kids, or any kids, or even the responsibilities of carrying a juice box without incident. Apparently, the cherry on top of the park disaster was Rick bursting into tears when a squirrel snatched a cupcake from the picnic blanket. And just like that, the carefully curated image of Rick as the fun, adventurous, cool single dad was imploding in spectacular fashion. All the confidence, the bravado, the Instagram perfect dad selfies, none of it survived the reality of supervising actual children. Rick's fun single dad reputation is tanking faster than blockbuster stock in 2020. Meanwhile, I sit back with Cody and Mia, watching this train wreck, sipping my coffee, and feeling that sweet, sweet vindication. Rick apparently decided that being banned didn't mean stay away. One night, around 10 o'clock, he showed up at my mom's house absolutely plastered, pounding on the front door and screaming about missing his family. The entire neighborhood got an unexpected performance, because Mom, always 2 steps ahead, had installed a Ring camera. The feed captured Rick attempting to look intimidating, swaying back and forth on the porch like he was auditioning for a slapstick cartoon. He teetered, overcompensated, and then classic Rick, face planted right onto the concrete, sprawling like a human kite with gravity as the pilot. For a few seconds he just lay there, flailing his arms as if trying to negotiate a graceful exit, before groaning and slowly attempting to sit up. The cops arrived shortly after, shaking their heads, giving him a trespass warning, and officially banning him from the property. It was poetic justice on a cinematic level. Cody watched the whole thing unfold on the Ring feed and the next morning asked me if Dad always fell down like that. I had to step outside holding my stomach, trying not to laugh so hard I snorted. It was the final ridiculous punctuation mark on years of Rick's chaos. Life, on the other hand, finally felt calm. Mom was doing amazing. She had started dating someone new, Mark, a history teacher with a calm demeanor who somehow baked bread on the weekends and genuinely loved spending time with the kids. He treated Mom with respect, helped around the house without complaint, and never asked me to be an unpaid babysitter. Cody and Mia were thriving in ways that were impossible to overstate. Mia was tearing it up in gymnastics, mastering routines that had me and Mom cheering from the sidelines, while Cody was dominating Little League, finally developing the confidence that had been missing while Rick was around. Both of them now called me Em instead of the begrudging big sister nanny, a small but meaningful reminder that our bond was built on love and not obligation. I personally had finally graduated from college. I had a solid, stable job lined up, which allowed me to save enough to upgrade my old beat-up Civic to a used Subaru, a car that didn't rattle at 45 miles per hour and actually smelled faintly like leather instead of despair. Adulting, while exhausting, had become real in a tangible, rewarding way. For the first time in years, my life felt like something I had earned, something I could shape without Rick's shadow looming over every decision. And Rick? Last I heard, he was still bouncing between couches, trying to convince everyone that he had been done dirty. As if the world had conspired against him instead of him simply being incapable of managing responsibilities. People around him were quietly amused by the absurdity of his antics. His so-called charisma and cool dad persona had become a running joke among anyone who had ever witnessed his disasters firsthand. He was living the perfect cautionary tale, a man whose own laziness and inflated self-image led to spectacular implosions while the people he had tried to control moved on to happier, more stable lives. Honestly, the sweetest revenge was watching him implode entirely on his own, while Mom, the kids, and I built a life full of peace, laughter, and real love. It was not about grand schemes or payback. It was about holding boundaries, sticking to them, and letting consequences follow naturally. To anyone following this story, here's the takeaway. Life sometimes throws people into your path who are unfair, selfish, or entitled, and they will test your patience relentlessly. The lesson is not to stoop to their level but to stand firm, speak your truth, and not be afraid to let the chips fall where they may. Karma has an uncanny way of showing up without warning, often in the most unexpected forms. Keep your heart strong, protect your boundaries, and take care of the people and things that genuinely matter. Life improves when you nurture those who deserve it and refuse to let others steal your peace. The little victories, the quiet moments of stability, and even the small fluffy pancakes on a calm Saturday morning become the markers of real triumph.